paper on evolving land rights in ACHOLI, the coping mechanisms. I'm so privileged. There is a lot of mystery surrounding me, so let me spend 1 minute of probably making you know who I am so that you can listen to me from that perspective. I have so many hats. I am a social scientist. That was my first degree. Then I turned into law. And I've been in active politics. I've been a member of parliament for 20 years until I successfully lost the last election. And then I went into academia. I did a master's in law, but that was not my passion. Then I went and did another master's in political philosophy. So I'm self-discovering myself at 46. Maybe I call it a midlife crisis. So my head now, I think, works political philosophy. I'm not so sure whether it works law. And it is on that background that I've been involved in some activism, and I release voices every week to the ACHOLI community, philosophizing ideas. I also upload YouTube videos every week, so the content of this discussion would also be uploaded for the greater world to see, so I'm indeed privileged. Evolving land rights in ACHOLI, coping mechanisms. Now, what we do in philosophy, in political philosophy, political scientists would say there is low voter turnout. Political theorists would say, why was there low voter turnout? Because it rained from morning to evening. Lawyers would ask for the facts, but political philosophers would ask whether voting would solve any problem at all, irrespective of. So I'm going to try to run on that lane. I'm going to try to run on the lane of political philosophy in attempting to handle this topic. Now, evolving land rights in ACHOLI, coping mechanisms. The first question that runs in my mind, my Lord and distinguished participants, is ethnicity. Because we have to define who ACHOLI is. Are we an ethnic group? Are we an ethnicity? Because if it is defined, that is when we galvanize our campaign. Because there are some rights individuals can consume that they don't need to be collected. But the moment individual rights cannot be consumed, then people tend to gang on groups, whether religious, whether ethnic, you know. So ethnicity is a collective group of people united by cultural and emotional bond. And that group should compete for political, social, and cultural space and resources. So in this context, ACHOLI is an ethnicity. So when I'm talking of the word ACHOLI in this particular presentation, we would now understand it not only as a geographic location, but as an ethnic group that have aspirations in this political role called Uganda. Now, even before I attempt to answer the question whether we have coping mechanisms, I think, my Lord, we need to philosophize what is the new identity of ACHOLI, because looking at it bluntly, that ACHOLI is this part solve of Karoma will not help solve any problem. And it took me so much time to learn that any problem without philosophers will never be solved. That's even why they took a piece of faith. Now, in my opinion, which is academic and good to provoke discussion, there are now three distinct groups in ACHOLI. Because if you address it generally, that Guru Kitumpade, you will not get to the solution. The first group is what I would call the pre-war ACHOLI, those who were born well before the war started. And I'm glad my Lord is here. The pre-war ACHOLI, these are the traditional ACHOLIs that had traditional means of subsistence and livelihood. However, in 1985, 285,000 heads of cattle were looted, and Acholis were considerably reduced into poverty. If you check the statistics as of 1985 in Kitgum, the total number of cattle and the institution of cows or cattle Acholis were having, that was the bank. Forget about this modern banking system. That was the bank. You pick a cow, send someone to school, you have cattle for marriage. So the pre-war Acholi is a generation that had their own mechanisms of survival. And one of the authors that you may need to read his works, if I may quote him, he made a very interesting statement. Garrison, in the works, The Anguish of Northern Uganda, he said, in an instant, the Acholi farmers were deprived of milk their cows provided, the additional acreage and higher yield which their oxen permitted them, their fallback for marriage, dowries, and education, and their savings which carried them through drought, hard times like sickness and old age. So the first generation of Acholis, what I call the pre-war, lost, they had the traditional means of subsistence, but they lost all their wealth, the oxen for plowing, the banks, as Garrison stated in his work, The Anguish of Northern Uganda. Now, the second group of Acholis is what I call the during war Acholis. And these are groups that were born when the war started. You know, if you open social media today, it's awash with all sorts of opinions. The world is not sort of opinions, by the way. I guess there are 4 billion human beings, and there are about 4 billion opinions. Now, if you ask all those giving critical opinions in the social media, if they are not in academia, you'll be surprised someone will say, I was born in the year 2000. I was born in 1995. It's not a crime, but these are the during war Acholis. Those who were born in the IDP. And there is a lot of literature there. One of the authors, the professional, Sverker Fridstorm, is a Swedish person. He was in Acholi. He is a sociologist. I met him about 15 years ago. And he stated the Acholi population were displaced from their natural habitat, as more than 1.5 million lived in IDPs. So we have a whole generation of during war Acholi that were born in camps. And then the last category of Acholis we have in my opinion is the post-war Acholi. These are generations that were born probably after the peace had returned and the Juba peace talks had already been signed. They should be those born in 2002, 2003, and about 20 years. Now, this generation are modern urbanites who have not lived in the traditional setting, and they don't have an idea of what the true identity of Acholi is. They are urbanites, they live from hand to mouth. The influx of the population in Gulu City is incredible if you compare to other cities and towns in Uganda. So they are urbanites who their attitude, I'll come to that, their attitude towards land productivity is totally different. They have a fresh defined taste, they have a fresh defined consumption pattern, they have a fresh language, and they have a fresh taste for music. Now, having defined who the Acholis are, I now come to say, what are the coping mechanisms? Each particular group has a different prescription for the coping mechanisms. So if we say, oh, let's go and do this, let's not sell land. The one in town producing an R&B song, speaking Luganda, eating with an altered diet, would not think like you. So, what are the coping mechanisms? That's the second part of my presentation. Now, this I come to know, having defined Acholi. So for me, when you're talking to me or I'm talking to anyone, I first cluster you in my head that which group do you belong to, because it helps me to give a package on the kind of advice I would give. Now, what are the coping mechanisms? We get to the law. We have the customary ownership that everyone talks about, which is enshrined in our laws, thanks to our seniors and forefathers, Chief Justice Windle, all those who are in the Constituent Assembly, that made an effort to codify, to put customary law in the 1995 Constitution. And this is the customary law that is now bringing even these challenges, because we are regulated by the customary law. My Lord made very interesting comments that Section 88 of the Land Act gives powers to traditional institutions. Section 88 should be read conjunctively with Section 5.2. Now, the drafting of the law, which is very unfortunate, I was not in Parliament then. Even if I were, you can't do much because it is the law for the whole of Uganda. Now, the first and immediate challenge, which we have to think of the coping mechanisms in relation to the ACHOLI, is that the drafting of the law gave powers on customary land to the area land committee and not to the traditional and cultural institutions. So Section 88 should be read conjunctively with Section 5. You will see in the drafting, I'm not disagreeing with my Lord, I'm just emphasizing. The drafting says the area land committee may consult. It is not directory, may consult the traditional institution. So we have a first crisis that those who are the custodians of the customs are not in the eyes of the law, the actual custodians of the customary land tenureship. And this is strange. Which in my opinion, it is even unconstitutional, because customary law is law held according to the customs of the people in the area. The customs in the people in the area says the Ruot and kings have a say on land issues. Then we have another law called Land Act, giving the powers of the customary leaders, of the cultural leaders, to the area land committee, which means by default, our culture is being amended by a piece of legislation called Land Act. The second challenge is customary land, which we need to think, because my role as a political philosopher is to generate thoughts, and I don't get tired of it. Even if I were alone in this workshop with one listener, I would still give it all the time. We have to start thinking. I've raised the challenge, the first challenge. The second challenge is the validity of the certificate of customary ownership. Does it have full force of the law? What is its purpose? In the works of Bashasha in 2011, anyone who would want to read it, a review of the land tenure and land use system in Kagere, he stated that certificate of customary ownership is not acceptable as collateral. So what is the purpose of that document called certificate of customary ownership? What is its use? These are issues we have to think. The next challenge, my learned friend Komaket Kilama fell short of saying, if the people have certificate of customary ownership, will it be within the family, within the clan, or within the greater community? All those issues are not resolved. And there is a campaign that I told they should get certificate of customary ownership to secure their land rights. I would want to think differently. Because the moment someone has a piece of paper, it becomes easy for that individual to live in that land, as opposed to the amorphous approach of having the cultural. This one again requires a lot of academic work and a workshop specifically to decide whether we should go left or go right in relation to the certificate of customary ownership. But I guess you can now read my opinion. My opinion is that the moment cultural institutions are empowered to do what they are to do, then we will not have these challenges. Now, what are the coping mechanisms? I read the works of last night of Acadia advocates, lawyer Francis Demara. He did a very good work. I have the copy here. The organizers of the workshop, one can share. even this pre-war, post-war actually concept. It's an academic paper I published in an international journal. I just extracted part of it. I could also share because it elucidates so many areas. Now, in the works of, I'm just winding up. In the works of Acadia advocates, they raise two coping mechanisms, and they argue either way on which coping mechanism can work for ACHOLI. Of course, we have already defined who ACHOLI is. For being kind, we say pre-war, post-war, we could have said A, B, C, and D, but that would be derogatory. Now, there are two coping mechanisms, but I would call it one, because I don't know why the lawyers split them. They are now calling for communal land associations as one of the coping mechanisms. Communal land associations. But I want to argue it concurrently with the land trust. In that paper, they are also calling for having land trusts. The difference, to me, can be semantics. Communal land associations is like loose associations. For example, I'm the chairman of the Mogide clan. I have gazetted and put a copy on all our land in Pade, Uru, Kikum, and Biari, that there will be no sale. I did it last month. There's a pilot project. Now, this is an example of communal land association. So, can we have this communal land association spread all over ACHOLI so that we have a bigger holding of land as opposed to individual holding, where someone says, "This is my father's land." When I came from Spain, I had something that gave me 2 nights to process. Someone was saying, one, loosely translated, that will the clan pay your children to school? So it means our society is fast breaking down into individualism as opposed to communalism. You know, so the communal land association is one of the options of coping mechanism. The administrative cost is okay. It is not formal, and but it would still need administrative guidelines by whoever can do it, whether the cultural institutions, whether the minister can come with guidelines and regulations under the Land Act. Now, the second option is that of the land trust. The land trust is a little legalist, because if we create a trust, then automatically we are regulated by the Trustees Incorporation Act, which is another law that regulates how trusts should operate. For example, I don't know how many trust entities are there actually that we can make is reference to. You can form an organization and hold it in trust for people. It's not profit making, but so you have a board of trustees. I think most schools and churches, like Guru High School, like you call it, there should be a board of trustees. Now, Parliament enacted a law that regulates the conduct of trustees. I think there are even statutory offenses, some offenses you can commit in the Trustees Incorporation Act that relates to abuse of trust. So the second option would be to form trustees all over ACHOLI. Awel, Lamogi, Pade, Kalong, Paibol. If we could have all these 56 or so clans forming into a trust, electing the trustees, coming with constitutions, this is one of the mechanisms that we can collectively protect or have coping mechanisms in the land rights. Because the way we are now, the pressure will keep coming. Don't think the pressure will end with Museveni's regime. The land pressure is all over the world. Even after this government, the pressure will still continue. However, the question for ACHOLI is, what is the coping mechanism? I've given 2 suggestions. Now, just 2 other observations, and then I sit down. Let us not, and I'm talking it with authority as a political philosopher, let us not look at the land issue in isolation of what is happening globally. Because this pressure is all over the world, in Pakistan, in India, everywhere. Now, there is an article which I would encourage anyone who wants to read the world 15 years from now. You better read it for your own survival. I even have a copy. It shaped my opinion. It is written by Nancy Fraser. Nancy Fraser, it is capitalism and something. I also wrote another article critiquing Nancy Fraser's article in the African scene. Now, the article of Nancy Fraser, we don't have to see ACHOLI in isolation of other parts of the world. Yesterday I was in Biale, there were gunshots, and they are also evicting thousands of ACHOLIs from there to come back here in ACHOLI. And yet in ACHOLI, we also have people entering our land and are not being evicted. So there is, the traffic is something interesting that we should study. And they were making pejorative statements. I have it on recording that go back to your land. And then if we state the same statement in Achuarang here in Noyada, go back to your land. I don't know how it would work. Now I don't want to go in the line of politics. I want to stick on my lane. Now the pressure on land is global. The pressure on individuals is also global. Capitalism is here to stay. And I want to say, ACHOLI was quasi-socialist society. We are collective. You are a product of the community. The marriage, the birth, and everything is celebrated communally. Genetically, we were socialists. You buy a god and you start going with the god, someone will stop you, that you need to take the kid will miss the mother. You know, as if you are not buying the god to go and slaughter it. That is the ordinary mindset. We are socialists. Now we have a system that is coming, which is capitalism, individual profit, individualism, individualism, individualism. Now the society is torn. We are not fast adapting. This is again a subject for another workshop. We are not adapting. Some tribes have adapted to capitalism. The Baganda have. They know what brings daily income. They know what brings weekly income. They know what brings monthly income, and they know what brings yearly income. Let's do a quick research in Guru. We have a whole bunch of post-war youth that they think land is for daily income. Now that is the challenge. We need to employ sociologists. We need to employ economists, and we see how to help our people to find means of daily income. Because people even sell land to treat flu. So they think that commodity is disposable income. So we are failing to cope, and this is philosophical, we are failing to cope with the pressures of capitalism. And we seem to think that government can solve our problem. In Nancy Fraser's article, even government is a victim of capitalism. Government of Uganda is a victim. We are now indebted. The debt to GDP ratio is 49.6%. We are left with 0.4% for the country to be owned by the people we want. So even the government is broke, but the ordinary ACHOLI thinks the government should solve their problem. They run to Nwaya to meet somebody to give them money, but the whole government is broke. They have failed to repair the potholes in Kampala. No one can give us a loan. So we have imposters who claim they have money and they are coming to take advantage of people and grab their land. So the aspect of global capitalism, which has surrounded us, we can even start observing from this room, electricity in this room, multinationals, Omeme, South Africa, who are the shareholders in this water, who is providing the internet, DSTV, multinationals, road constructions, China, Bank, Stanbic, South Africa, DFCU from Scandinavia, the shareholder. We are surrounded, and in the process, we are just a fish in the pond. So we need another urgent consultation where we get our dons and sociologists to see how ACHOLI can style up in the capitalism model. When I was going to Europe, I thought I could go and study how socialism could work. I joined DP because they were talking of socialism and a little bit of. But when I came back from Europe, I realized that even in the next 200 years, socialism may never come back in the political scene. We are even going to produce children with genes that can think capitalism. You put bread there, 3 pieces of bread and their 4 children, they're going to fight for it. One may take all the 3. And yet, when we were growing up, someone would share. So these are philosophical issues, and I don't want to get diverted, but the answers to me lie in law, which I've said, arguing about those communal price. The second answer lies in economics, how ACHOLI can style up in the advent of capitalism. And the third coping mechanism lies in sociology, how we can have the post-war generation try to regain the glory of the pre-war generation. There has to be a deliberate effort by the city council, by the government, to decongest the city. Because the traffic, someone should do a research on rural-urban migration. Sweden did it, the great centrums. If you have the same facilities in smaller places, then you can decongest the city. When you decongest the city, you produce more of the original ACHOLI. Like my lord, you will not produce the GMO version, who are just in town with flash disks, memory stick, dreadlocks. I'm sorry, sports betting. I'm sorry to use those descriptions. Thank you so much for listening to me.